Two. Whoa, what's happened here? Still loading. Decided to go loading. All right, let's try that again. Let's switch if we can. We'll refresh the page. We have slides. We'll provide you these slides. What you can do is you can reach out to me, or perhaps I might just reach out to me, or put in the career for anybody that wants to know here. Let's see. Make sure we have good internet. I had to come into this school because of the fact that we didn't. We couldn't really. I didn't have internet working home, so I had to sort of fake it until I make it. All that. So don't mind me if you have any questions. So we're here to learn C sharp. We're here to learn what it is. We're here to learn why we should use it. We're here to learn the basics. We'll even, if we have enough time, and we'll try to have a break at 7 o'clock for everybody to rest. We'll try to go ahead and try to make some APIs. So that leads me straight to what it is. What are we doing here? We're going to talk about the problem, why. In other words, what's C sharp doing, what it is, what are the different types. We're going to talk about types, and we're going to talk about compiling code, which is something we've never really talked about too much. It is something that a lot of languages do, but it's not something that we sort of tend to think about when it comes to JavaScript and all that, even though we do it. And we'll talk about them in just a second. Let's just get over with a couple of things that sometimes some people want. The history was invented in the year 2000 by Microsoft. It is still owned by Microsoft, but we'll talk about the fact that it is also open source. It was created by this gentleman named Anders, and we'll have you in your mind spell and pronounce his last name, because I certainly will not butcher it myself. He invented a language you may not, or maybe your parents know, called Pascal. He also invented from Pascal the language Delphi, and then also TypeScript, which we can talk a little bit about probably at the end of this, or perhaps in the break. It became open source in 2007. Let's talk a little bit about that history. Here's some things about what we're doing and all that. We'll go into more of what C sharp it is in just a second, but I want to just give you some basics. It was considered in about 1996. It came out to something called Classic ASP. Now, I know I said it started in 2000, but it was derived from something called ASP. And some of the technologies we have in there, and we'll talk about in the right-hand side of the presentation in just a second, started with something called ASP. It's called Active Server Pages. So it's definitely something that was before all the different revolutions. TypeScript, JavaScript is pretty old. JavaScript is back in the 90s. So this was around at the same time. But these were server pages. These were pages that were created on the server and then shown to web pages to the website. You would interact with the website, fill in a form, click on a button, and then the server would give you a brand new web page. Totally different thing than what we do now. Now, C sharp has not remained that way. It has moved forward, and there's different names that it goes by. So on the right-hand side, if you hear .NET, if you hear .NET Framework, as it is right here, if you hear words like MVC, not Model View Control, it stands for that, but if you hear MVC, this job requires MVC, that is more probably a Microsoft technology. If they talk about themselves using the Microsoft stack, that is something that we know about, that is have something that we're learning about today. If they hear ASP or ASP.NET, yes, you'll be able to do those type of things, and we'll talk a little bit about those. If you hear .NET Framework, this is sort of an older version of this, but there's still people using it. Idilma currently works at a company that uses .NET Framework, even though it kind of fell by the wayside in around 2014. But you may come back to a world where you have to do C sharp, you have to do APIs that are creating C sharp, you have to create something that we haven't created, which is websites, HTML with C sharp. And those are things that have to do with the Microsoft stack and technology. If you hear the word web forms or Razor pages, right? No, not Razor as in the company that does the gaming laptops, the one I'm on right now. No, it Razor with an O, and Blazor pages. Even though that's not related directly, we won't go too much into those things. If you hear these words, this is a good screenshot and things like that, or something to memorize or come back to in the slides. Again, I'll give you the PDFs when I'm finished. then I'll it's just something that you'll know and you'll know more about. Pretty popular language. There you go. Oh, as I make a joke right now, before I usually tell you guys that TypeScript is a pretty popular language, and I show this slide, and we're at the very top. C# is down here, but it is pretty popular. And more important, in my opinion, than anything else, it's popular among people that pay for programmers. In other words, jobs. If we were to show a list of jobs available in the market, this list might invert, might flip, and the things at the very bottom might be something that are available at the top. That would be 100% for SQL. Of course, JavaScript is something that we all use, although TypeScript has sort of surpassed it, and any job that is asking for JavaScript is really asking for TypeScript. And you know what I mean? So, but C# is something that has a lot of jobs out there. So it's an important thing to think about. All right, we have a new person. Ralph. All right, Ralph. Welcome, Ralph. Appreciate it. So before we go on there, one of the things that I wanted to show off, and Ralph Mr. Sebastian, you have another first name. I like that. So one of the things that Mr. Ralph or Sebastian will tell you is that there's a little bit of a difference between TypeScript, between C# and JavaScript. And we consider that when we do things in JavaScript, that there's no compilation, that there's no that whatever we type as we type it is available and it runs directly. But if you think for just a slight second of your React, there was some delay. It's literally a fraction of a second. The moment you open up React and you type on it, there is a slight delay, and it does something, and then the web page is updates. And you'll think it's instant, but it's not actually instant. And you know this because in some situations, not for those of you in the cohort recently that has been using Next.js, but for the prior to cohort, you knew that there was a build. As in, we had React, we had to build it, and then it could go live on your front end. So the key to this building is that it wasn't ready. It needed to be prepared, right? Baked, if you will. Or the correct word is built. C# is one of those languages. So when we jump into this, what we'll find out is that we'll learn how to do these type of things, and we'll have to sort of run them. And it will not look unusual because we'll do the same thing we used to with Node. We'll type something that looks like Node space in the language, the program that we're typing, and we'll do that in just a second. But you'll see that it is actually something that you're not quite used to and things like that. And we'll go more into that details a little bit later. Okay? So let me get something up here. It's all right. So let's go back to JavaScript for just a second. We have something in JavaScript that is, what's the problem with JavaScript? There's nothing wrong with JavaScript, and we were able to do a lot of different things in JavaScript that were, truly things that gave us all the things we wanted to. They went ahead and let us know how to do things. We created a new variable called a. We set it to hello. We type it out. We use this method called typeof that lets us know what type it is and what kind of variable it is. And we says, okay, it's a string. And you're like, cool. Guess what? Now you're a number. And we did the number off, and it goes, of course, it's a number. It was always a number. And this kind of changing back and forth is something called coercion. It's a badly named word. It's something that sounds negative, but it is a benefit that we have there. So it's definitely a feature. It's not a bug, right? So it's not a bug, it's a feature. We get these benefits, but sometimes in certain situations, and Todd likes to remind us that for example, at my job, where I work for a fintech company, a financial technology company, that kind of we don't want to guess at what the variable is. We get it from somewhere, and we want to fail if it's a number, but it's wrapped around the quotes. So if this was 1, 2, 3, then if we added hello to the 123, we would concatenate, copy these two together. We want to not have JavaScript try to figure out what it is. We want to force it. So with C Sharp, we tend to be specific. So this is an example. This is int for integer. You can think of it like a number. This is an integer as in 1, 2, 3, 4, not something like 3.15, right? So this integer is single whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? The age you are, not the height in fractions of an inch, but the age you are. And then you can specify something called a string. And there's much more than C Sharp, but we're going to be playing with these type of things together. Okay? So for us to do that, we have to start with a little bit of coding. So we're going to do that in the next step. What I want you to all to do is, this is a good time to go ahead and unmute yourselves and let me know, have you all installed .NET?
Yeah.
Perfect. Sounds good. In any situation in the future where you say to yourself, I'm in the computer and I don't have .NET installed, you can always type in .NET. In other words, .NET. Great domain name. But it gets us to the right place. And there you can go ahead and click on download. Now, I'm going to get Windows because I'm sitting on a Windows computer. But you're going to get whatever the computer it's at. .NET, the modern .NET, works on Windows, Macs, and Linux. So it works on any environment, and in fact, technically works in a Chromebook as well. So it's a solution that works for everybody. The latest and greatest is version 7.0, but there's a chance to download to the version 6.0, and there's older versions. In fact, down here under all options, we can see some of those options. Let's make sure everybody has installed it. Let's try it. Open up your terminal on any computer you have. In the terminal, once you get the prompt, I want you to type in .NET, DOTNET, space, dash, dash, version. What you should get is a number, not an error. If you get an error, let us know. Everybody getting a number? Doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but it has to be a number. Thank you, Cassandra. I appreciate that. Excellent. Love those thumbs up. I love it. Thank you very much for that. One of the things that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and try to create some projects. So we're going to get to the right places. I always try to do this ahead of time so that we can go back and forth between my slides and the code and follow along and get a project at the very end that looks exactly like mine. So let's go to our Boca code directory. You can choose to put it in anywhere you want and then type in, C sharp. You can't type in the number sign, dash intro, right? And then we go C sharp intro. And in here, once you go into that directory, we can type in code space period. And Visual Studio code comes up. As we wait for everybody to do exactly that, again, remember we went to create a directory and then we ran our Visual Studio. I want you to let you know that Visual Studio is Visual Studio Code. When we talk about Visual Studio here, we think about the word code. If you look carefully, your prompt said the word code. It didn't say Visual Studio or VS. And the reason behind that is that Visual Studio originally had, it was different. And Visual Studio is truly originally for a long time. It's something to the order of 20 years old. And it looked differently and it was a completely different program. Now I have a Windows computer, so I can run the original, the what would you call Visual Studio as opposed to what we usually use, which is Visual Studio Code. And it's a little bit more sophisticated, and it has projects and other things we won't even go into. This is not something that, let me go, right? Let's see, do we have something like that? Look at that. I have apparently nothing that we have in there. But I have some different options here that you won't have. But it asks me different questions. It has a bunch of different projects. And you're like, well, that sucks. I wish I had that. All these different options. It has some questions about it. What can we do to achieve this goal? This is some amazing number of pre-built projects. that we need ourselves. Well, we got you here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to showcase, give me 1 second, .NET new. Why did I actually went to search it, but you'll see that in our slides, get in here, we have this link here. And this link here has the instructions to go to this in a second. We'll type it in a second. But the page looks like this. I'm going to go ahead and switch it over here. It gives us a lot of information about how to create a brand new project. And with .NET, think of it more like the npm init that we do, where it creates a package.json when we do Node. We have something similar in .NET. And what we have here is a lot of different projects. This is what this list comes in, they're templates, if you will. And one of them we will doing is we will see in the future how we can create a project that builds a sort of boilerplate, a beginner's project, with both a sophisticated React project and a sophisticated API project, all with one line of code. We'll do that and we'll save it to the end. But for now, just understand that we can create, and we have to, unfortunately, with .NET, a project. In JavaScript, we can get away with type in node space in the JavaScript file, but we can't do that in .NET. So I want you to all follow me along. If you would go PW, please word Damien. We are all in a similar directory. Ignore the fact that it's a SQL and backslash. I don't know what that is. It's from last generation. But you can see that I'm in the book of code directory and that I'm in the C# intro folder. Because I cannot see you as I switch back and forth, and I can't sometimes read the chats, do unmute yourself if you want to comment. I don't have any problems. As always, as you all know, interruptions is my favorite game in the world. So once I'm in here, if I do L or LL, right? If I look at, please excuse me, I don't have Unix here, but if I look at what's in there, there's nothing in here. We have a new one. Danielle is joining us. Fantastic. Wonderful. Danielle, what you want to do is make sure you install .NET. I'll go back to the slides in a second. And what I'll do is we're pretty much created a new directory. You can jump towards that in your computer. And then we're about to run the following lines. Do you guys all see it? .NET space new space console. I'm going to go ahead and press enter. Go ahead and do the same. Does everybody get sort of a bunch of text, or does anybody get an error when they're trying to do so? If you get an error, let me know. Danielle, you can go ahead and do so. Just make a directory if you have .NET installed. If not, go to dot.net on the internet and get it installed. Sweet. Now let's look at what's going on in here. I'm going to switch back to the Visual Studio with Visual Studio Code to be more specific. And now we see that we have several things in here. And we have program, and we have C#, a project file, and you can all check the same thing. And you even have a folder with a bunch of things in there. The object folder we can ignore. In fact, let's do that by making a .gitignore. We're going to ignore it, and also in the future when we check it into GitHub, we'll also ignore it. So .gitignore, and then we'll say obj. And just to give you a hint, type in a bin. We'll talk about what that is in a second. You can go ahead and click on save, and now these two directories, some of them have been already created, unusual, should have been ignored. And I just realized we didn't get in it, so let's do that. Let's see. Ooh, fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and close it. Required asset build to debug are missing the C# intro, add to them. Let's go ahead and say yes. Did anybody get a pop-up that said the similar things? Nope. That's all right. One of the things that we have here, I believe, is some extensions that have for C#. Extensions, please excuse me, C#. Extensions are like anything else in an app store. You have to be careful where you download them. The first extension, if there's anything that says Microsoft, that sounds okay. You can see things as far as coloring and things like that. So if you see mine having colors, yours does not, most likely it's an extension I have installed. None of these are required. I don't know what this one particular one is that I have installed, but if there's anything different, you can know that's the case. I clicked on this icon. So I'm going to go back to click on this icon to list myself in here.
Do you want us to download any specific ones?
No. You can continue with what you have there. No problem.
Okay, and also, could you show me how to get those folders again?
Absolutely. So the folder is, we want to make sure that we're into code. That we're in if we go PWD, we're in the C# code. We did in that location DotNet console, DotNet new console. And then when we were there, we just typed in code space period, as we always do. And then you should be back to this page with all these things in there. Is that true?
I don't have the .ds code.
That's okay. I think that looked like it was a plugin that it was asking me for something, and it created that. You can ignore .vs code. In fact, let's make sure that Git also ignores it. VS code. Some of you do this with a GH program. I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way. Git init. We're just setting up the information, and now both the things on the left-hand side have changed colors. If you've done this yourself, all I did is in that directory, I type in git init. My prompt has some information about this. Don't worry if yours doesn't. But if you notice, all these three are gray because they're part of the period git ignore. And also these other ones are green because they are ready to go, but they're not checked in. Okay? Great. Let's click on the program.cs. Okay? Right now, what we're seeing is a very short program that looks like a basic hello world. It looks like a console log. And although this comment is in there, it pretty much looks exactly like that. C# normally does not look like that. In fact, C# normally looks like a full Java completion language, which has a bunch of different things that we won't even go into too much. Just be aware that C# is or was Microsoft answer to Sun, to Oracle, please excuse me, the original, the one who bought the Java language. And they sued Microsoft because Microsoft wanted to start using it. They sued them. And so Microsoft says, oh, okay, we'll tell you what, we'll copy you and then we'll rename it. So C# initially was there as a Java, not JavaScript, Java replacement. It is trying to be as close to Java as possible. In the most recent version, version 6, and not in version 7 that we're using one, we can almost start with doing some basic things that you might not see in other projects. You might walk into a project that it has already in the first starting program a bunch of things that you're like, why do you not do it the way Damien showed me? This is just the modern way of doing things. In fact, it is, if we look at the project, we take a sneak peek. There's something in here that says implicit using. And this is the reason why our project looks a little bit smaller than our program.cs, please excuse me, looks a little bit smaller than what you would normally be used to. Okay? There's no need to touch this project because this file is very similar to the package.json, where we normally don't touch it unless we are told to by different changes that we normally do. In this case, we don't touch it, so we don't need to, but it is the one that holds the packages, all the different libraries you're using. It sets some information about it, which version of C# in this case, or package.json does hold, for example, if you want to specify which version of Node it's using. Let's get this running. Let's get some magic in there. DotNet, run, press enter, And you'll notice how incredibly fast .NET is. Incredible. I'm still counting on all my fingers, and I've run out of fingers by the number of seconds. But hello world does come up. Now, to be fair, what's going on is compilation is happening. We are converting our program that looks like what you see right here into something that the computer understands what's going on. If we take a sneak peek, we can open the bin folder, and Visual Studio is hiding from the fact that bin folder has one folder called debug. Debug has one folder got .net 7.0, and in there's all these programs. Okay, we can look at that. dir, please excuse me for using the different Windows version. Bin dir, this isn't where the files that I'm seeing here are. Let's go into debug. You don't have to follow along if you don't want to. You can do this on your computer, just so watch this part. There's our program. I'm going to run it as I normally run programs that are local. C#.net.intro.exe. I'm going to press it, and you can see that it instantly runs. I'm going to see it because it was a little bit fast. You can see that it's running as fast. In fact, it's running faster than if we had node space in our program in a JavaScript program. So we are running a program, and it is compiling a program. In fact, it will, if we wanted to, on my Windows box, compile a Mac program or Linux. I'm making a choice that it wouldn't, but I just want you to be aware of it. I'm going to go back down to the folder that is the one that has all the project. I'm going to go dir. I'm going to confirm that this is what I see over here. Collapse this directory. It is. Don't worry about the colors and things like that. Again, fancy guy, fancy prompt. So we have our basic programs. Before we continue on, anybody blown away? Did I blow anybody away? Amazing, right? Node and, of course, C# is case sensitive. So we cannot type in, we're like, oh, it's just like console log. We cannot type console lowercase. Nope, it doesn't. By the way, if you noticed, it went and said, you're an idiot. It's console with a capital C in C#. So it changed it for me. But if I had kept it in lowercase, it wouldn't have known what to do. And of course, because Visual Studio has understandings, yours it should do too, we have all the options that console log have here. A slight, tiny benefit is that I have something very interesting here. We won't go too much into it, but I have write line and write. In JavaScript, we have console log, and that's it. It writes a line and presses enter or return on the keyboard. In other words, if you want to write a little bit, then write a little bit, then write a little bit, like you want it to go in horizontal, we could do this by writing, and it would not go to the next line. Okay? So that's one of the options that we have here in C#. Not that all interesting. C#'s major things is its variables. And we're going to try to go back. I'm going to move up here. I'm going to remove this comment. You can do so yourself as well. There's nothing of value at this moment. And I'm going to utilize the two variables we saw just a second ago in our slides. Int age equals 25, I wish, and string name, oh my, how is that Copilot doing for you? Semicolon. JavaScript doesn't require the semicolons. If you're cool like me, you use them. If you're not cool like me, that's okay. You are also cool. But C# does require them. Not having the semicolon isn't cool, and it will not work. It will not compile. Let's try that. Let's see if I'm bullshit. Please excuse me for using the word bullshit twice. I'm going to type in .NET run. I'm going to wait a couple of seconds, and it's going to tell me there's an error. Semicolon, error, it's trying to guess the point going on. But truly what it's doing is it's missing the semicolon. If you ever have an issue where there's a little bit of a red at the end of your line, you can know that that's the case. Let's prove it. I'm going to go ahead and come in here and do the same thing. Great. Just like in JavaScript, we can do things like comma and do the variable. Hello, I'm going to correct this. My name is, and it's similar to console log. Let's see if it's proving me wrong. Ignore the warnings. That's simply something we can turn off in any moment. But what's in below the warnings is the white, and it's missing the name in there. So that was just a mistake on my end. There is one thing we have to do with these variables. We have kind of the same thing with the backticks. Quotes are required. We can use single quotes or double quotes in C sharp, but we cannot use backticks. In JavaScript, if you remember, we would do something like console log, and then, whoops, it's trying to help me out here. And we would do backticks, and then we could do blah, 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 and then we could put in a variable this way. Everybody remember this? Right? We cannot do that. Well, right. We can do something very similar. Let me get rid of this comma. There is some way of using the comma. We can do this with the curly brackets name. Cool. Let's all do that. My goodness. Code Whisperer, right? Not Code Whisperer, Code Pilot. I went ahead and added this $ in front of it. This allows us to do the curly brackets. It's now Visual Studio also understands, because if you notice, it doesn't require the $signs. The $signs can be the beginning, and now every other curly brackets from forwards will do those type of things. We'll read it. If you are typing away and you haven't caught up, the idea is just to put the two curly brackets, the first variable, and curly brackets the second variable. Okay, and you'll see that it comes up here. Everybody seen my screen, by the way? Again, if you're just catching up, there is an option at the very bottom, just below this, where my finger is here, where my cursor is right here. 3 dots. Choose full screen, and then choose change layout and choose spotlight. Full screen, spotlight. Those are 2 things you get in the 3 dots, and you'll be able to see me if you cannot see my screens at this moment. We've blown everybody away. We've done the absolute very, very basic version of it. And remember that we can also do things like this, where we do the other things, name, again, with a plus, and something else. Just like in JavaScript, we can combine both the string interpolation of these curly brackets as well as sort of pausing the text and then getting out of it. So there you go. My name is there. Let me put that little space there, and then my name is there. It's also in between this text. Everybody see that? Everybody getting the same thing? Everybody getting something different?
Mine is saying it doesn't exist.
Perfect. Which part of it, Yaslin, does it say it doesn't exist? Do you know if
No.
it's...
When I just run .NET run, it says it couldn't find the project to run.
Perfect. Let's do this. Over here in this project, go LL or and see if you have both. You have this. This is the key. You have one file that says CS proj. You may not have one.
So I just write dir.
Yeah, you can go dir. My apologies, just up an L. I have Windows, so I cannot type an L. I should have had a little shortcut so I could do that.
Oh, just write L.
L and press enter. Yes. That should list everything. Or over here, you can even sneak. The idea is that you have this file right here. A file that ends with CS.
I do have that file, but
you do?
What you're showing right now in your terminal is not showing them.
Perfect. If you have the file, then the issue is that if you type in pwd, you're in a different location that this project is at. So you have to get yourself where this CS proj is at. You
Okay.
can.
I think I got it from here.
And that's it. By the way, guys, if this ever happens to you, this is a common thing. I often are open the project in different places, and then eventually go to the right place, and now my terminal's in the wrong place, or I've gone into it as I was showing you in the bin directory a second ago, and I'm lost and things like that. There's always a trick where you can come in here, copy the path, and then you will literally have the location of the file here. I right-click to paste. You can have the location of the file there. This is a Windows end of things, but you would have a Mac version of that. And then you could go and say, this is the name of the file, but I could CD into that one, right? So if I type in here and I go over here and I can CD, then you can understand that we would go CD and we will be in that directory. Okay? Now that you type in DOT NET run, Yaslin and everybody is, are you getting, even though it takes a little bit of time, again, we talked about why it's compiling it. Do we get the same similar line, at least with your name or my name, whatever's in our project? Love it. We're getting the yes from everybody. Thank you. Perfect. If you do have any questions, again, unmute yourself and let me know what's going on, and what do you see, because I want to make sure that everybody sees the same thing as me. Perfect. Okay. As always, I'm very happy to see all of you. Letting me know what's going on here. Apparently, we've lost. Oh yeah, no, it's there. Okay, I am still with you. All right, let's continue on with some slides. Woohoo! All right. So what we've done here is we've created a project. C Sharp needs to have a project, so there's no need to live by itself. Now, there's caveats to this, but I won't go into this until much later. Truly, if it's a C Sharp, we have a project. And to be fair, Node, we should have a project. And a project in Node just means a .cs, please excuse me, a package.json file. In the CS, in the C Sharp world, it's CS proj. That's all you need, that file there. The other directories, the bin, the object, the other things it created will be created even if you just have that project file. So sometimes that's all we need. We have a bunch of different projects that we can do that can help us, similar to how we have create React app, create next app, right? All those kind of project creation things that do a lot of work for us exist in the .NET world, including React, and we'll look at that at the end of this presentation. Are we doing in time? We're still doing pretty good. All right. One of the things, oh, there you go. Amazing. One of the things we have is we have that web page to see what's the list, but we do have the list of consoles or project into it. You know what? Let's all try that. I'm going to open up the terminal and I'm going to type in DOT what is it? New list. And this gives us all the different projects, what their name is, what it is, essentially it is, what's it called. If we wanted this one, whatever this one is, we would type in that word, and then like the type of project, what languages you can do it in. It's usually C Sharp by default. That's what these square brackets means, and you can see that there are quite a lot of things. Know that. Okay, we won't go too much into it, but you have to know that you don't even need to remember the website and things like that. You can come in here with that. Cool. All right. So, whoa, I just jumped way too far into it. Bear with me here. My apologies. Integer. Perfect. New project. Let's create a new one. So, we have different things. And one of the things that's interesting about this that we don't have in TypeScript or other languages that we have thought about is that there is a difference between a number and a whole number, like 1, 2, 3, 4, the number of fingers I have and you have, you know what I mean, in your hands, and for example, something that has a lot of decimal points in it. A long number, that is a type of mathematical definition for the word. A floating point decimal, can be numbers there, and in some situations, by the way, there are oh my gosh, I'm blanking out on the word, but there is positive and negative versions. What I mean is a float is a positive and negative version of a number, and they go very, very, very high, like 10 trillion to negative 10 trillion. And then there's something called unsigned. And that's a way to go and say, I have a bunch of numbers to the left of the decimal point, to the zero, positive numbers, and a bunch of numbers to the right of the zero, negative numbers. What if I just sort of combine them both? Wouldn't I get twice as many numbers, twice as big as infinity? Remember, these are not infinite numbers, but that is true. So if literally you care about decimal points, but you don't care about negative, then you can get an unsigned float that gives you much more numbers than we need to. The numbers are so high in most situations, there's no need to worry about. But there is a need to worry about if there is a whole number you care about, the number of towers, how many, I used to work for a cell phone tower company. How many towers we got was not a percentage. Please, excuse me, was not a decimal. We didn't have 235.6 towers. We had 235 towers. But the height in meters or feet were a decimal. We could have a height of 206.7 meters. It was measured in meters, by the way. So we can have those things. So we have to think about these things. And it sounds like, why do we care? But it's so that we have a guarantee of what we're going to get back. So that's the idea behind that. Okay? So one of the things we can also have is small, tiny, tiny numbers called bytes. There's nothing special about that. And there's nothing unusual about that, except for one thing over here that we'll talk about in a second. Let's get back to our code. Please excuse me, I've lost my Visual Studio. What is it? There it is. We are. Let's go to the temperature. We're going to do float temp equals 23.7. No, what's temperature outside? 89.6. And it's it doesn't like it. Wait a minute. I thought it's okay. It doesn't like it because with floating points there are ways to do this. There's another one that's close to this, but we just have to put in something that lets us know what it is. In this case, float. It's a little bit of annoying, but it just has to be the definitions in there. Okay? Let's add it to our text in here. And the temperature outside is curly brackets temp. And now we save it. I compile it. Anybody getting any errors? Notice that even though it was an F is just simply for me to define a constant. In this case, a number that is non-changing. We do have not the F here because the number is a numerical number. And for example, we would have it up in here. In this case, it's a bad example. Please excuse me. Let's just put, it's in this case, it's F for Fahrenheit. I don't mean F for floating point, which we had to define in this case. Okay? So again, the temperature here was not F for Fahrenheit. This was F for floating point, and we're keeping in this variable that happens to be the word temperatura in English. Cool. Numbers are hard. Is there anything else that's harder? Well, no. That's it. Numbers are the hardest things. We have something unique. You've seen strings, and we'll go into other complex things in a second, but we have something pretty cool. And you won't really notice what kind of cool it is until we write it down. So I'm going to keep it up here for a couple of seconds, but let's put it down here. And I like to use an example of tax forms. Taxes is what my wife right now is doing at home. She's doing a lot of different taxes. So let's see what that is there. Let's just follow along in here. Enum, that's just a word. It's a mathematical word, and it just means a collection of something. And here we're getting an example. The days of the week, in this case, tax form. Now, what kind of enum? In there will be strings. So we're kind of confusing things in here, but you'll see what I mean in there. In fact, my apologies. I think we don't have to do this at all. That was to do with my goodness, with I'm blanking out here with TypeScript. Please excuse me for that. We have different type. Oh my God, this is this is truly amazing. We have different types of forms. We have the W-2. We can have a comma here. We can have the 1099. We have a comma here. We have apparently there's a W-9. I didn't even know that. Okay, cool.
S-corp.
Tell me, an S4?
S-corp.
S corp. S corp is I don't think it's a type of a form, but there should be an S corp. The form that we would fill in there.
Oh, Schedule C.
Schedule C.
Schedule
Cool. Scheduled C.
No, I think it's schedule.
Perfect. That sounds good. So what we can do here is it's giving us an error. Just bear with me here. Expected. Okay. We need to define it here. We don't only need to define them. We'll do it in this case, but I think we'll just. I think we need to put quotes in here. Let me bear with me here. Nah, it's it. I don't know what's going on in here. Let's not worry too much about it. We'll go ahead and say this is 100, and you'll see what I'm talking about in 1 second. 200, 300, and 400. Okay. So there. Okay, let's type in a number here, and let's type in A or form. All right. So there's something I have a little bit off here. Don't worry too much about it. A quick Google search would answer this, but I want you to put in your mind, and we have these in TypeScript. This is magic? And right now you don't see magic. All you do is I listed a bunch of forms in there. And the idea with these forms is that they can be something that we can see outside. Let me try to explain it. Please excuse me. I'm going to override these to maybe explain it a little bit further. Please excuse me. I'm going to type in employee. You can follow along. And again, please excuse me for changing this. Equals W2. We're going to go ahead and say, bear with me here. I think I have a typo here. No, this should have worked just fine. Okay, we're going to have the corporate or consultant equals 1099. We're going to go ahead and say that the contractor is a W9. Oh my, that sounds like a good suggestion. And an intern is a W2. Well, let's just show the crypto one. The crypto is definitely the K1, right? That's definitely the right form with that. Now, right now it's giving me an error, so just bear with me here as we should be able to just define this. Convert this. Okay. Bear with me here. Oh, that's not okay. All right. Let's just do it over here with the 100s. This one I'll go back and during the break to figure out, but let's not worry too much about it. What we had is, what problem am I solving here? What we had is issues in the past where, and let me put a semicolon on there. Now that should quiet everybody down. Let's see.
I think it was complaining about something else.
Yeah, I think it was clearly complaining the whole time about something else. Let's see what's going on in here. All right, so let me just do a quick check. Please excuse me. All right, that's all right. Let me talk more into it again. In a couple of seconds as we talk here. What I'll do is just above. We'll just do a quick check. Enums in C#. That's what Google is for, or as you guys call it, ChatGPT. And okay, and they're saying everything should have worked exactly as it is. Perfect. All right. According to everything else, this is the way we do it. So congratulations, is the way we do it. All right. An enum, what the purpose of an enum is one single way of doing this, one single way of calling it. So again, this is hard to explain unless you put yourself in our shoes here. A while ago, and we can see it in there, let's pretend that we all kind of agree, right? Sebastian's the head of taxes. He creates a list of these taxes, and he says, listen, for the purpose of keeping track of it, I'm going to give you human readable version. And the employee, spelled if you want correctly, it may be in English, an employee one, and I'll worry about what it's actually called on the back end. Again, we'll worry why I'm not able to do W2. We should be able to just, bear with me here with that in the back end. And we should be able to do each one of these and define what it is. So let me explain more about it. I'm going to type in here and I'm going to say you know what I mean, we're going to use this, that we're going to go ahead and clear this. Actually, you know what? Let's not clear it. As Jonathan always tells us, let's comment it out or hush it. So we're going to do console.write line. And we'll say you need tax form in which, oh, let's go ahead and come over here, and I'll put the dollar sign in front of it. And we'll see what's going on here in just a second. Should have had this not complain so much. I'll find out what's complaining in just a second. So we should have something that's a little bit easier to read. Okay? Bear with me here. I'm trying to get you guys to not get the errors. You don't have to follow along. I'm just going to see if that's what's going on in there. It is not. So this should have been the correct thing. Let's literally copy and paste from another example and know that it's not. Bear with me here. You don't have to do anything here. As you can see, the correct example doesn't come in, doesn't seem to do anything here. So we'll find out what's going on in there. Let's see. Proceed to namespace and declaration.
Because tax form capitalized? Oh, I don't know.
Text forms.
Yeah,
So
is it Pascal case or no?
It doesn't really matter how it is. Remember the choice of how we do things. Only in React must we do things, and we'll see that we kind of this tendency to do things. We'll talk about what those are in the future. But although React requires a component to be uppercase, it's doing it to save you from causing any issues. It's not doing it for its own limitations, and in C#, it's not using for those limitations either. Okay, so what I want to showcase there is, let's just say that we wanted to put in here which tax form this particular customer owes me, because it's an employee, and it's you, and you're going to be an employee. So I can type in here tax forms, just period, and let's do it over here. Something's going on. There's a semicolon there. I know that's missing. We'll have to figure out what's going on in here. Just bear with me here. String, tax, which tax form equals tax forms dot. There we go. So we'll look at what's going on in just a second. But the most important thing I want to showcase there is that imagine not that the tax forms enum is just above. Imagine that it's in another file, in another location where you don't know where it is. You've imported, and we do have those options to C#, just like you've opened a million times, you've imported a million times projects similar to this in your project. So when that happens, what you can do is you have now a shortcut. These are all the ones that we have here. Okay? And so you can go down here and know that it's the right employee number, and ignore what it's suggesting here. But just understand that it's going to be figuring out what's going on. And that although now, again, you don't see the problem, and so you don't see this amazing solution, imagine that you don't have to remember that it's W-2 or C Corp or contractor or whatever the situation that we talked about earlier. Imagine that someone else that is knowledgeable of you has defined it, and there's just English in there. It's an employee as opposed to a contractor, as opposed to the crypto one, right? The one that we pay for the crypto people. I don't know what that is. And so now we have those defined. So imagine in here I had them, right, as W-2. I'm getting an error, but imagine, it's because there's no equal signs here. And it should be doing something over here where it allows us to do 1099. It's helping me doing this. So imagine that you don't have to ever think about these ever again. And it seems like the best for me. Okay? Where we have some of this work already done. So it's 7 o'clock. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break, or let's do.
So what you were showing with us, is that like an object with key value pairs is showing us
It,
that.
you're absolutely right. So it's very similar to Qt object with key value pairs. And we could achieve the goal in a similar way. In fact, in this situation, we might be able to do that. The thing with enums is just another type that we should be aware of. We have them in TypeScript. They're a lot more flexible in TypeScript. And it's just something we should be conscious of. But it's a way that you really will be like, this is stupid, this is stupid, this is stupid. Oh my God, this is genius when you run into that problem.
Now,
So
is enum just for object-like scenarios, or can it be used for any kind of list?
it's limited to basics, so integers. I do believe you can make them into strings. I think Sebastian's correct. It might be only numbers, but I'll be very surprised. It's supposed to be sort of this almost key value pair, but the beauty of it is that it's, and we might be able to use it in the future. It's super super like there is only one, and so and it's more English. You know what I mean? It's more like we can define something, and then all of a sudden the accountant can go and say, you know what? It wasn't the 1099, it's 1099C. That's more specific, and they change it in one place, and like a function we're all using, we magically get it through our systems. When our page, which we haven't touched in 3 months, shows the tax, it now says 1099C because the accountant changed it. So it's all these magical things that we get from this one single version of the truth, right? We can also do this with databases, right? We could write and pull it, you know what I mean, this particular thing from a database or from a function that looks it up in the database and all that. As opposed to like in each one of the places, in each table or page or HTML or component or API call, you typing 1099, and now it's not 1099. We finally upgraded. Now it's 10100, and then or 10200, please. And then all of a sudden we have to change 30,000 lines. So that's just something just to think about in the future. All right. So we've learned about enums, and these are great. But the magic is in part of it. Man, I have a lot of brightness here. There is magic in the fact that we explicitly say the type. And so the benefits are that there's no question that the integer is there. There's no question it's a number with a decimal point as opposed to no. There's no question we know whether there's negative possibilities or positive possibilities. There's no question we know it's a tiny number that's called a byte. There's no question that we know it's a whole number. There is benefits to that. But the biggest one is object oriented. And if you don't mind, if you know about it, great. Let's get comfortable with the word object oriented. What programmers started ending up realizing, and this in one of the examples we'll do in a second, will make a lot of sense, a lot more sense than what this might sense, is that things can be grouped. And so in this case, can you imagine that I am the deity of your choice, the god, the gods, whatever it is, and I am making a dog, and I'm defining what is to be a dog, and then I'm making what it is to define what is to be a cat, and then I'm making what's defined to be a cow, and I'm realizing, there's a lot of things that are the same. They both make noises. The three of them have four paws as opposed to two hands and 2 feet. They both walk forward. They both sleep. They both eat. They both do whatever the opposite of eating is. And so we can go and say, what I could really use, as with anything that we have, whenever I'm a programmer, I always should be looking as to how to make not duplicate work, how not to reinvent the wheel. So a lot of these things can go and say, what? We won't define these things that are shared here and then again here and then again here because I'm duplicating work. Let's define that they make noises up here. An animal makes noises. An animal in this small scope has 4 legs. An animal eats, and an animal walks. Great. Then we can go and say, when I'm making a dog, I can say, let's sort of inherit everything we did, right? I have my bad vision and I inherit that from my dad. I have my last name. I inherit that from my dad and my mom because I'm Latin American, right? So I inherit a lot of things from someone that I come from. But another way of thinking about it is I share some commonalities with other things. I share speaking English with each one of you. So if we were to define how to speak English, we wouldn't define it under the one that describes Damien or under the one that describes Cassandra. We would define it as the one that describes people that go to Boca Code, right? Or people that graduated from Boca Code, or people, right? So we could define something over here. Let's pretend that everybody somehow speaks English. That's not true. It's not even true for half the world. But let's pretend that in our small, tiny world of the whatever the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of us, 9 of us, is that we know that it's true. We speak English. So we could define the rules and the work of English being up here, and then we could define the small things over here, right? Cassandra has nice hair. I'm pretty bald and happy with that part of it, right? So there, we can define the details on that. And this will be, maybe some of you get it, some of you don't. And in one example we're going to use in a second, I'll give it away. It's a bank account. You'll realize that a bank account, whether it's a checking or savings, you all have them, are similar in a lot of ways. They hold money. Okay, you can deposit money into it. Okay, you can withdraw money into it, but there's some rules. Okay, they have maybe an account number. They're going to have different account numbers, but they have an account number. So we could now start benefiting with that things. And so we'll do that in just a second. Before we do that, um, yeah, let's jump into some things about it. Well, maybe we let's. I'm going to skip this for just 1 second. Just bear with me here. So let's do this. Come and follow along with me by creating a new file called bank account.cs. Okay? And this bank account.cs, we will. It is a new file, and we will do something a little bit different. We will say public. I'll explain what this is in a second. We'll say it's a class. So it's something we're going to be using. Let's just call it that. Bank. Let's just say checking. Checking account. Oh my. Oh shoot. My apologies. I gotta turn off that code whisper or whatever. Whoa! Slow down. Okay. Well, let's do this. A checking account is a type of thing we're going to be using. And we'll talk about what these are in just a second. And for the very, very, very basic use of this, we've created objects in C# and in JavaScript before. So you've kind of defined that. And I don't know if it surprises any one of you, but Java does know how to do things with classes. But let's ignore that for just a second and remind ourselves what we're doing here. It's a checking account. We'll think of a bank account like I used in the checking and savings in just 1 second. Right now, this, let's just go public. I'll explain what public means in a second. We're going to say this is a double. Double is the same thing as a floating point. It's just much easier to do with a lot of things. So just call it double. Picture of it as opposed to an integer. It's not 1, 2, 3. You don't have $1 or $2. You might have $1.46, as I sometimes find. And then all of a sudden the ATM doesn't want to give me that money. It's really bad. Let's follow along with this. Balance equals 0. Okay? And we'll look at what it was showing us in just 1 second. Okay. Let's just save that for a second. Okay. So what this means is I have a type of a thing I will have a type of an object called checking account, and that object will have a property called balance. And you've done this before in C#. I'm sorry, in JavaScript. So let's do that over here. Let's comment out or comment. So by the way, I comment out the enum. You can do so the same. I commented out the line that I was trying to make an enum. I'm going to comment out all the code that I have in here. Okay, you can leave it there, but I'm going to go to the bottom here just so I have a new place to work at. Now I'm going to make a new bank account. Okay, so I'm going to go checking. Hey, it knows the file. Now, this is not blowing anybody away, maybe because in React, you've seen it where it's like, wow, I just created a component, I did export, and without doing import, it did it. Oh, it must be the same thing, Damien. But it's not. I called the checking account. I'm going to put it over here on the right-hand side for everybody. And I'm going to collapse this. We're not getting rid of anything. They're all still there. I have bank account and program. I have bank account on the right-hand side, I have program on the left-hand side. So again, I'm going to type in checking account. It's going to remember that is. I'm going to say, and that, if we look at it, it's the type, the name, and what it's equal to. And again, sorry, but it is correct. We're going to go ahead and type in here. We'll do an account. My account equals new. Just bear with me for a second with there. Checking account. Okay, and you might be getting these things if you have code copilot. You might have to really calm it down, as we don't want to just sort of jump in there. It's writing the right thing. It's amazing, but we want to sort of do it ourselves. And this bank account has so my account it has a balance. And I'm going to say, let's just go with what it's suggesting. It has a balance of 100. And then I'm going to go console.writeLine and say your balance is curly brackets, my account dot balance. Okay, and we got to remember our dollar sign in the beginning. Now it's happy, put a semicolon, save this, and you can go ahead and I'll leave it here on the grid. .NET run, net run, and we should get the message your balance is, and the correct balance, which is in this case $100. Did everybody get the same thing? Cool. All right. So balance, what's going, the silence is positive. I didn't have a chance to see everybody come in there. My apologies. I'm going to put it on the left here. Just like you, I have sort of a cheat code here with my sincere apologies. I have you all come in here, and I can see you now, and now I have some text I'm copying over here. Great. So this isn't maybe blowing anybody away. You've seen this in C# and in JavaScript. Please excuse me for using those two things interchangeably. They're not. One is JavaScript and all that. And this looks a little bit strange, but in fact, in TypeScript and all that, we would look something very similar. We're saying, I'm about to create a variable. It's of this type. It's not an integer. It's not a string. It's not a float. It's this complex object, a class in this case. And then it has a name. That's the variable name. We're going to say it's new, and it's going to instantiate. I'll repeat these words in just a second when we go over all these words. A new version of it, going to use the rules that I have here. The class is essentially rules, and this rule will come over here and populate this with its basic rules. What's one of its rules? That it has a balance at the beginning of 0, and you can change that balance. Let's prove that it starts with 0. Or y, and then we'll go in a second. I'm going to copy and paste this line here, and I'm going to run it again. And we're going to go see that once I run it, I get the balance is 0, and then the balance is 100. So the balance is 0 here. Why? Because I started with 0. Then I set it, as we've done a million times with other objects that we can create, to 100. And then I say, hey, what's it now? 100. And this works. And this is good. And then let's do something else over here. Let's do public class. Again, we'll go into what public is in a second. Savings account, curly brackets. Oh my God, it's the same thing. Oh, I love copying and pasting and retyping in balance equals 0. Okay, and we can go ahead and I'm going to copy it here, paste it here. Okay, and does it do the same thing? Does a check savings account work the same way as a checking? Okay, it does. Right, I've renamed it here, and I'm now creating my new account is a balance account, is a savings account instead of a checking account, and it can do the same thing. No one's being blown away. But you can imagine, hey, Damien, come on, it was the same line copied, not a big deal. I don't mind copying it even a third or fourth time, like a stock market account and all these other type of fancy accounts you can have in there. But once we get pretty complex, we'll have to be duplicating almost everything because a lot of things in the savings account and checking accounts are pretty much the same. So let's use some of these inheritance and let's utilize that. So let's come up here and say there's going to be a new one, public, class, bank account. Bank account would be kind of the parent or the one that makes sense. And this one could have public, double, balance equals 0. Now I have 3. Now this is getting a little bit ridiculous. This and this, it's all the same thing. Why can't I just sort of say whatever you do here, and in a minute you'll see we have a lot, let's just duplicate it. And we can do that. We can go and say, you know what a checking account is? It inherits from a bank account. And now we can get rid of this part. And this one also inherits from bank account. Bank account. And this one also inherits. And now I can go and say, well, what did I do? At this moment, not much. I have these changes. I have a savings account. And once I run it, it will run and it will do the exact same thing after a while. Whoop-de-doo. But wait a minute. The saving account doesn't understand what a balance is. How come it knows? Well, it inherited the stuff from a bank account. So what we're about to do is add a lot of things to this bank account. We'll do it together. But we will go ahead and figure out what it is and not worry about the different things that it can do. Let me explain what those things are. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to go -1. Oops, the customer, the customer service agent made a mistake. They typed in -1 in the computer, and now the customer has a negative balance. And that's ridiculous, right? In fact, he has -100 balance because this person that we should fire put a minus sign by mistake in there. So we're programmers. We can go and say, listen, makes no sense to start it off at a 0. So what if we kind of truly decided what was happening in the beginning? So let's rewrite this. Let's make this private. And we can say, I want to be in control. I don't want just anybody to set it. And the moment I say private here, this says, I'm not allowed to touch the balance anymore. And we'll do it in a different way here. Okay, well, I want to sort of, when you started, I want to ask you for the balance. So what I'm going to do is going to do something called a constructor. So let's do constructor. And I'm going to define where it is. And of course, we're going to see what's going on in here in a second. And it was a hint of what's going on in there. Constructor, we're going to say public, and we're going to essentially copy the name of the class, open and close the parentheses if we don't want to receive anything. And we'll do that for now. And then we'll set the balance to start with to 0. Okay. And now it's going to be happy. It's having some trouble in here. We'll fix this in 1 second. Now let's fix it right now. I'm going to go ahead and this is a little bit ridiculous. What if we can just pass the balance when we first started? After all, we know we're about to create a bank account. Let's go ahead and pass the balance in here. So I'm going to go double amount, right? So the initial amount that comes in here, I'm going to set it to the balance. So instead of setting it here, I'm going to go ahead and comment these two out and set it up here under the balance. Okay? And we'll see what's going on in here in just a second. Here. So it's having a little bit of problem. We'll solve it in just a second. We'll see what's going on in here for a second. Let's pretend that we ignore this by going savings account. Now he's happy. We'll fix what the problem was in a second. We're breaking this for 1 second. We should never use the parent, always the children, that is a checking account or a saving account. We shouldn't use the generic bank account. For this purpose, we're going to do this. So we're checking what's going on in here. And now that we're checking what's going on in here, we can do something here, which is like, you know what? If the amount is less than 0, now is a negative number, well, we can make a choice. The amount is equal to 0. So most likely it was a typo. We'll do this a little bit better in the future, but we have some kind of savings grace here. Okay? Now we still can't get the balance in here. So just for the purpose of brevity here, we'll change this back to public. So even though we could get back here, we could get this working over here. So we're setting it to 100, and then we're getting the balance. Okay, let's see if it works. It creates a new bank account. It puts it into this one, calls it there, checks if it's number, and goes in there. Did I save everything? I should have saved everything. Let's see. Okay, what happened there? All right. Okay. So we'll see what's happening in 1 second. Okay, let's see. There's no argument given. A corresponding reply. There we go. Bank account, 100, double. There's no argument given that corresponds to the required amount of this one, double. Okay.
I think on the other objects, on the checking account and savings account,
they are having trouble. That's fine. That could be one that's having problems, but we're using the bank account. It should have been some. It does have some issues. You're right. Let's go ahead and correct that. Okay. We'll do this the same for these guys. We'll do it in a little bit of a trick and all that. I think you're absolutely right. So what we'll do is we'll define them, and then we'll say, you know what? Don't worry about it. Public checking account. So what's going to be its constructor? Double amount. But we're going to say, I don't want to put the basics on it. Just do whatever the other guy, the parent, wants you to do. I don't want to do anything here. Nothing else for me. Right? So if you look at it, I'm going to then copy this. Thank you, Renzo. And I'm going to make it the same thing in here. So what I'm saying is, I think this is it. I think you're absolutely right. I'll leave this up here so each one of you can catch up a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and run that over here. It was exactly that. Thank you, Renzo. It was that the other two, even though they weren't being used, it just needed something in here. And this is good because we can now start using it. So I'm going to go back to using not bank account, where I can start using the benefits of what we did there by saying that savings account, the correct thing. We should not be using the bank account. We can talk a little bit about that. In fact, there is a way, I'm not going to go into it here, that you can say this class is not to be used. This code up here is cool, but really we need to be inherited. In other words, we should be using checking or bank account. I won't go into it right now, but just know that there's a way to do it here. Okay? I believe it's called virtual, just in case you want to look it up later. Okay, now we have this amazing protection that nobody can go negative. Let's see what happens if I go negative. That's a problem. But is it negative? No, at least it's 0. It's not bad. What would be better is if we throw an exception. And we do this in JavaScript, right? Let's do it here. Throw exception. And we can put in text in here, no negative numbers. Okay. Oh, throw new, please excuse me. Oh, through? No. Let's do that in the present. Throw. I want to spell it in English. My goodness, I am blanking out here today. So we throw an exception. We're saying that's not cool. This is not cool. Stop like faking it. This person probably made a mistake, the person that typed it in there. So now, instead of resetting the balance, instead of the person taking the $100 bill, typing a negative number by mistake, and then having it be 0, we get an actual error coming out. And as you can see, it's an exception that we control. And it's an exception that we can even go ahead and catch. Let's do that. Come over here and go try, curly brackets. I'm going to get rid of this here. And we have the try catch in C#, right? And let's do it all the way to the end. And we're going to go close the curly brackets. Whoops, close the curly brackets, catch. It's helping us out there, exception, E. Remember, we do the type first, what it is, and then we say a variable. E is a common variable to use. And we can do console. Amazing, it's helping us write e.message. Let's see. Let's see how that looks like. I did the try up here and this whole section down here. Okay? As you catch up, you can see me doing it over here. And you can see that I will run and I'll get a more pleasant message. It's more in English. It doesn't show the stuff that looks scary. And importantly, we could reply to the API. We couldn't just crash. We could reply back to the API with some information. And so what we've done here, we've controlled it a little bit better. If we go ahead and put in a valid number, I'm feeling rich today, then we could go ahead and say, hey, let's bring it a bigger, and I do want a balance, and I put a legitimate balance, so now my balance is a legitimate $1,000. Any questions so far? Cool. We've said we are protecting the balance, but it's kind of exposed, and to be fair, we could run this line, and it would all of a sudden break our magic code. Right? So now the balance is wrong again. It's minus 100. We got to fix this. Let's go ahead and fix this by going private. Right? I'm not going to take anybody to get it, but now we have no way of getting it out there. Let's create this. Public. Get balance. We can't call it balance, right? Whenever we call it, we're just going to return the value of this variable right here. Copy. Paste, semicolon. Okay? Oh, please excuse me. When we say what we are, we have to say what we're returning. We're returning a double. In this case, it's balance. Now we have an option in here, not to get a property, by call one of its methods, one of its functions, dot get balance. We are creating a balance. So now we can't do this, but that's good. We never wanted to do this, but we can still now get our balance back. Let's go ahead and run it. And we can see that it sets a balance of 1,000, as we did on line 19. And we're able to get it back. So we have a great system here. We could decide to do things, but the problem right now is that we can't deposit. Great. Let's go ahead and do some of that real quick and all that. We won't go too much into it. So we can do that by making a new line like this. And we can maybe even make the same kind of logic as this. Heck, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and come in here. I'm going to create a new one, copy and paste it down here, because it's almost the same thing, and we're going to call it deposit, right? It's a method. We want to call it deposit, and we got to tell you what is it going to return. We can return something called void, which means it's not going to return anything. You know, we could go and say maybe we want to return the new balance. Double. Now we're going to return the new balance in this situation. So as the amount, we're checking if it's negative. We don't want to ever have to deposit negative numbers. So we're checking negative and doing this good if statement. Great. But now what we want to do is we want to sort of add it together. We can't just say the amount is the deposit. We could say the amount is the balance plus the deposit. Now that's great, but it's still, we promise to return the balance, so then we can go return balance. So the deposit allows us to take in a number. It handles if it's negative and saying, you're not allowed to do that. Changes the balance to the new amount, and then returns that for us to know should we wish to. Let's use that. I'm going to go ahead and say, kind of like do something similar than this and say, hey, savings account, I'm going to deposit some money. I'm going to deposit, let's deposit $10. And it's returning something. Now, this is legit. We can do this, even though it's returning something. We can run it and say, I don't care what it returns. I'm about to get the balance in there. So it's $1,000, the initial amount, plus this $10. Or I can go and say, double balance equals this brand new variable, right? It's unrelated to this. It happens to be the same amount over here, but it's there. And I can go and say, let's use that one, right? That's my choice. Cool? Any questions about that? Cool. You can imagine us doing a withdraw that would do sort of a minus, would check, are we trying to withdraw minus $100, in which case you're trying to fake the system. We would do the opposite, things like that, right? So we could do that. We're not going to waste our time with this. What I'd like to know is tell you that our bank is pretty unique. And then when you open a checking account, we're cool. We're cool, and we're going to give you $50. Heck, let's make it 100. So although we are not doing anything, let's change that. If you open a checking account, we're going to set the balance equals, balance let's do this, please. Excuse me. I'm going to, it's okay. We're going to go and say, we accept that you're going to take care of a balance, and then we're also going to deposit $100 into your account. And notice that it knows what what deposit is and how. It's right here, and it's inherited there. So if I hold down the command key or the control key on Windows and click, it's going to jump into the class that it's not part of, but it is inheriting from, and say, oh, you want to call this one. And we're cool. You see that? Now let me see if this has a little race condition here. So bear with me here. Let's see if we get the $1,000 we set up. It's kind of overriding what's going on in there. I know what's happening, so just bear with me here. I'm going just for this purpose and not go into too much detail of what's going on in there, and just set the balance over here. So I'm going to go and if you can't do this, equals amount plus the $100 that we're adding to it. Okay. So what essentially you're doing is you're overriding what this is about to do. You're saying, this is cool, but I'll do my own. right? And you can even say, I don't want you to do this. Oh, okay, that's fine. I'll do my own balance, and then I'm going to add $100. Okay? So we'll go ahead and run it. Ah, please excuse me. I know what I was doing wrong, and it wasn't that. It was using the wrong thing. I should be using checking account. Please, for the reason of brevity and for to make it a little more sense, let's go back with the code in here, and we'll change this. So I'll change two things in here. And if you'd like, you can pause for a second before you catch up. Let's make sure we have it in there. So what I've done here under checking account, I've brought back deposit 100. And over here on the program.cs, I've changed what was savings account to checking account. Okay? So as you see, I'm going to close this for a second. It says, oh, you want to create a new checking account? Cool. Let me do whatever the base one, whatever the parent was doing. Let's scroll up for a second. It grabs the amount and sets it as the balance. Cool. Once you're done with that and you're finished with that, I also want to go ahead and deposit an additional $100. Again, because the bank manager wanted anybody that walks in the door and creates a brand new bank account to get an additional $100 over their amount. Okay, any questions? Any questions about the logic of this? In other words, why a bank account would give you $100 extra dollars? So if we look carefully, we have the initial $1,000. Since we opened a checking account, we got an extra $100. And then we deposited an extra $10 after that. Can you imagine the next day or something? If I come in here and do that with a savings account, well, that's cool, but I get the $1,000 and my $10, both of them being my money as a new customer, but that's it. I don't get the extra $100 because saving accounts don't have that. Saving accounts have a special thing, of course. If the initial amount is over $10,000, over $1,000, let's just say over $900, then we're special. We're going to do the deposit of $200. We'll give you extra money if you use a savings account. Okay? So here, we're inheriting all the magic of this one up there, and we are making our own choices and doing if statements and getting all the magic of the above without the stuff, with our additional work, without having to recreate all that was up here. And you can imagine this is a big, long page. Okay? Go here, press period. Before we continue, any questions about what we've done here? One last thing. Sometimes we want to say that we want to handle both a checking account and a savings account. In C#, we ought to be specific. This code is only for one of them. And you're like, oh my God, I got to duplicate all my work. No. In these two situations, what they do is they do represent a bank account. So we're saying we're going to create a new bank account called My Account. And what type of bank account is? Well, it's a complex bank account that is a bank account in addition to the savings account. So in this situation, when I run this, excuse me, you might say, I didn't do anything in here. But in other situations you will see in the future, you would have to create a function that accepted a bank account and you wanted to accept both a savings account and a checking account, right? And so you could say, I want to accept all bank accounts, if you want to put it this way, and inherit some of this information with that. Okay. Any questions so far? I think we've covered everything we normally do with this in record time. Cool. Let's get into the weeds. We've seen C# types. We've seen how to create new projects. We'll see in a minute. If you stick around for a couple of minutes, I know we'll probably go over 8 o'clock. So if you can stick around, you've gotten the basics. We're going to go into some details, and we'll spend the next 10 minutes doing that, doing the following things and understanding some things. And we'll go over some nomenclature. Again, we will give you this PDF class. Can I give it? Oh, I can't share it here. Okay. But let's find out some wordings with object-oriented. All right, so I'm going to stick with this slide for quite a bit. So let me get a drink. In object-oriented, there are two things that represent the same thing we're pointing at. One is the rules, and these rules are called a class. And in this example that we have of this fine lady here, her name is Susanna. And Susanna is of the class human. So she can be objectified. Please excuse me for using a little humor here. She can be objectified. This is old-fashioned programming from the 70s. When we talk about the rules that affect her, the rules that we can talk to her and she talks back, that she has a name, that we can ask her, Susanna, you're an expert programmer. Can you build this app for us? And Susanna goes, I'll be glad to. Love it. Here you go. Those are things we can do because Susanna is she is defined by the rules of human. So she belongs to the class, not the class that you came to here at Boca Code, but the type of thing called human, as opposed to the type of thing which is a dog, let's just say. But she is an actual object. She represents something in real life. When we move from the definition of what it is to be a human to actually Susanna, we instantiate. We make an instance of her. An instance, please excuse me, of her. So she instantiates, becoming an instance, and now she's an object. She has a name, not just simply a property of her called name. There is an actual name, not like, I know I can call Susanna's, object dot name, but she'll be like, yeah, it's Susanna. Dot address, 1-800, 1100 Boca Road. So, and she can be asked, hey, Susanna, can you do me a favor? Can you send an email? Susanna goes, glad to. No problem. I'll send an email. Hey, Susanna, can you make me some pasta? You're very famous for your amazing pasta. Susanna goes, glad to. I'll make you some pasta. So the concept of what she is and what things she has are in the rule set called class. And we'll look at our code in 1 second, going back, and we're using these words in the code. The object, which is the real Susanna, not just any human, or in other words, the definition of human, but this exact human is the object. She has properties that are defined by the class that she belongs to, but are filled with information, with values, by the fact that she's being instantiated. And she has things that she can do, functions that belong to her, which are called methods. And you've heard me and Gio and Todd sort of use the word function. When we meant function, we said the word method. And this was because that's how functions are called in the object-oriented world. Okay, so we have a picture. Let's go back to our code and see what it is we were talking about. Here, we are talking about a type of class, see it says class above it, called bank account. And it sees the bank account over here, and because it's public, I can access it. Okay? And if I can access it, and remember at one point we can set private here, we can hide things or we can showcase things in here. This is a private property called balance, something that holds on to values. Properties hold on to values. These are the rules of the class. This is a property because it holds on to the value, in this case 0. And this is a special method called a constructor, but these are all methods. They do things. This one gives us back the balance. This one allows us to deposit something in the balance. This one allows us to, when we're instantiating, when we're making an actual real account, in this case called my account, into a real thing, we say new, this instantiates a version of it, and we pass to the constructor some information. So I'm instantiating something here. My pleasure, Yasin. Have a good one. I'm instantiating something here, and right, and I am utilizing here. These are methods that do things for me. They may return something here, or they may return nothing. If they return void, that means that it isn't in the void. It's that it's saying, you can just call me, I'll do my thing, but I won't tell you anything back. You go check somewhere else. Like maybe we would have a new one called, calculate interest. It's been a month. We need to give interest to the savings account. We need to give that 0.05% interest we give every single month. But we don't really need to get the balance back. Just, we run it at midnight. We just say, hey, bank accounts, get your balance. And they calculate the new balance. They save it as a balance, and they do that. And they can be called with void so that we don't really care. Getting a balance probably needs something here. But public, add interest, and let's just say it's hard coded, can go and say balance equals set balance. There you go. Even writes it for me. Apparently, I'm very generous in our bank. Each time I call this, gives you a 5% balance. Which bank does that in the future, right? And we can go and say, this is not supposed to return anything because I call it at midnight and it's just supposed to change the balance. Once it changes the balance, it's done its job. I don't need to call it and all. And I could call it here by calling and saying, you know what? Oops. My apologies. My bank account dot add interest, right? And then all of a sudden, my numbers will be the $1,000. And because it's over $900, it's going to be $200 more, plus the $10, plus the interest. And we'll see why it's having some issues. Let me see. That's fine. I think I didn't save it over here. My apologies. That's all that happened. But I added this for those who are keeping track. I added this line right here, then added this line over here. That's what I did. And we can get a little bit of numbers that should be above what's going on in there. I'm not sure what's happening, but it should have been, if we have to figure out what the calculation is, it should have been a little bit more than that because that looks like the standard amount of money. So let's go back. We define classes that have the structure, the methods, the definitions, the rules. Once we instantiate them, we have real things and they have real values. They have properties and methods, these objects. The properties and methods are defined in the class, but they have values and they really do things in the objects. Any questions so far? We have some more words we can go through, but that's about it. Let me just go through a couple of different things. I'm going to quickly go through them, and you can go back to them later. But there are other terms we tend to use. I'm going to define them a little bit quickly here. You're welcome to stop me, but I won't go too deep into them because I really want to showcase something that I think you really will love. Inheritance is when a class becomes an object. When we say not any bank account, but this one specifically. We create a new bank account and now creates an object. We have a variable that represents that object. This is inheritance. Encapsulation. When we had the balance and all the problems we had the balance, we hid the balance. That means that there is intelligence within the code that cannot be accessed except through the doors that are the methods and through the rules that those doors, the methods had. You can have a negative number or else we threw a conception. Encapsulation means everything's inside and it has the intelligence of being inside. When I instantiate a class, I get an object. So class becomes an object. Class is still, the definition. So I could create 1, 2, 3, 4, 25 different objects. I could have in our code create one balance for Susanna and a null balance for me and a null balance for Nina, my dog. We won't go too much into abstraction, but polymorphism is something we won't go into a lot. I alluded to it in there, but sometimes when we want, we have an ability to go and say the opposite of what I said. I said that in certain situations, you want to sort of handle any kind of bank account, and then you would instantiate, create a new checking account or new savings account, but we want to handle it like a single bank account. We have kind of the opposite. You might want to say, hey, when I call this function, I want it to be calling function number 1 when it's a checking account and function number 2 when it's a savings account. And I don't want to do an if statement inside the function to figure out what it is, like I would have to do in the JavaScript. No. Hey, computer, just take care of that. These are some of the methods we have in there. I'm going to show you off just before we go. There'll be just small, about 10 minutes more to go. Any questions so far? Awesome. One of the things I really, really, really love is our magic here. We have our code and we're good to go, and I'm going to go ahead and close it. Feel free to get in it, git add, git commit, git push, and put it onto your Git repo. But before we do that, it's time to blow you away a little bit. In this situation, you're welcome to just watch or follow along. There's no problems. I'm here. I'm going to go pwd, and notice I'm in the C# intro. I'm going to cd ... get out of the directory. And I'm going to do make directory. And I'm going to go C# -react. I'm going to go cd into that. C#, oops, please excuse me. I got too excited. C# -react. Did I spell it? I spelled it. Short react. Okay. So I'm going to go .NET new React. And again, you're welcome to follow it here, along with me. This is going to take quite a bit of time. I'm lying to you. Look at what of a liar I am here. When I go dir, I get a lot of things in here. And in fact, I'm going to go code space here. And as I do this, I get a lot of projects. Now, I'm going to do 2 things at this time. Again, you're welcome to follow along. I just typed in, let's look at it. .NET space new space React. We did console last time. I did React, and it created both an API project and a React project. In here, what I want to do while we're still here is I want to just come in here and type in .NET run. I'm going to press enter. This takes a while. While it's doing its magic, I'm to switch and jump around this code, showcase some things that we will see all of a sudden come up for us. And maybe there'll be benefits to seeing it live, but just trust me here. What is running in the background is it's compiling and putting together some magic things in here. Let's see, require assets to build and debug is missing. We can just say yes to that. That's fine. It's creating the front end, and I'll show it to you. It's sitting here in client app. If it looks familiar, it's because it is. This has a package.json file. This has a source in saves and app.js. Starting to look familiar? It has an index.js that you may have not ever opened where you're not supposed to. It has some components in there. A counter, a fetch data. Look, fetch data has should have had different things in there. It's not doing things correctly, but whatever. It has containers, it has magic stuff. This is a sophisticated React app.
What was the command you used to run it again?
It's .NET space new project directory .NET space new space React. That's the key.
Gotcha.
Now, it is a React app, and it's sophisticated. In fact, the fetch data is looking for stuff in an endpoint that is related to this. This is pretty awesome. Absolutely. Now, I said there was an API. Let me show you what that is. There are other things in here that are setting things up. This is a little bit, not that much, more sophisticated stuff in here. There's a weather forecast that has some definitions here, a class similar to our bank account. And in here, there's something called a controller. And Microsoft uses this technology called Web API. I know it sounds like an API on the web. That's so stupid. Microsoft has a tendency to call things kind of an obvious name, which is really complex. But the concept is that there is an intelligent part of the system, and there is a model, and then sometimes there is what's called a view. So it's model MVC, model view controller. There is the definition of what we're going to keep track of, and we'll see it in a second. This is what we keep track of. Then there is an intelligent part of it. This is something that does something. And because it's an API, there's no kind of view. There's no front end. Because the front end is the React app. But don't be too worried about this. See that there's things like get. Okay. We could have done a very basic, and in other situations when I have more time, I do a super basic, essentially Express app. But this is a little bit more sophisticated with some intelligence that has a name with it. And again, when this pops up, we'll see it in just a second. It's still going. Watch. It's the first time it sets it up, it's a lot of work it's doing. But once it sets up, it does some magic things, in which case I will showcase when it comes up. But imagine that it has some intelligent here. It's doing some randomness there. What it's doing here is utilizing some built-in things that we won't go too much into it, that you see in Python, where you're creating a loop of 5 things, and then you're randomly choosing. What it's about to do is the API returns 5 random temperatures. Again, we saw this. This is the model. It's going to return a date for these temperatures, a temperature in centigrade Celsius, a temperature in Fahrenheit. It just does a quick calculation based upon the Celsius, and then it does a summary, a text on this weather. And it all belongs to this backend, and it's a simple API, and with a complex that it made front end, and it's still chugging along here. Let's just let it go. But essentially, we have almost, to be fair, except for a database, a final project. And I did it with 3 words, right? Right there. Exactly. Now, You still would have to do a lot of the work, but a lot of you have noticed in your final project, if you can remember all the way back then, that the final project on the API, we asked you to do it first, and you were done within 3 days. And then you were laughing at us, please, I did the back end in 3 days. How long could the front end take? And those took 7 to 10 days, right? And we were, almost to the last day finishing things up, especially with sophisticated ones like Sebastian's. And so one of the things that we have here is the backend is fairly short. This is the backend, and it is, let's see, 33 lines, including some spaces, right? There is some information in here, but it's almost like the old, make sure to put in express and make sure to put in, course and things like that. There's even a course line in here. I'm lying to you. They didn't put a course line in here. Okay, let's ignore that. But for example, it's put together something that I'm going to show off in just a second. Again, please excuse me as this is still compiling and doing example, Swagger page. Right, so if you don't mind,
Yeah, let me stop.
stop, and then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and share my screen. Share. So this is an example of a Swagger page. And this is a super sophisticated version of the Swagger page. But what you should see and what I want you all to understand is that there is essentially documentation made. This changed Eddie's life because with a little bit of work, I showed him there's a little bit of work you have to do JavaScript. You get it for free in C#, but you just get A, documentation for anybody who wants to use it. B, a way anybody else can test it. A customer of yours, the ones who hit the API, you can test it. The other developers, the developers that are in the middle of working on the front end and are getting a weird error from your API. Well, maybe let me test the API. A QA person, a boss, another developer that wants to approve your work and all that. It works like this. You can define some things in there. They use a pet store, of course, for the right information, but you can think of these little points as your different endpoints. This is a post, this is a put, this is a get, and then I can click on them and then it expands, giving me the opportunity to try it out. I click on this trying it out, and it seems that it can accept the value when I click on something, and I can see what it is, I can see the endpoint, I can see what's going on there, I can try it. It lets me know what it officially did. It lets me know what it replied back. It shows me what is actually being replied back. Down the bottom, I'm going to scroll down quickly here. It shows me what it's supposed to reply back. This is the structure of what it's supposed to come back. So now I can go back and say, whoa, you're missing the name here. What is this? Right? So it's over here. Please use this over here. So this is what it's supposed to, this is a response back from the body. So this is magic. You have not created any of this. You simply pointed and you had it a line. Let me show you what that line was. It was literally, where's the line? Maybe it's missing here. That's the problem. In C#, it's one line. In JavaScript, it's one line plus a little bit of JSON file that describes some information. But once it's done, you have this magic file. And I know it might not be pretty impressive, but you have a page that describes how to do it, describes some details. If you've described it well with information, let me jump over here. Please excuse me for jumping around. With some documentation that you would add here and things like that, it could go ahead and showcase it here, describe it here. You can go and say, okay, I would like to try it out. I'm supposed to give you a file. Let me upload. See, easy to use. Let me choose a picture. Maybe it accepts a picture. This is an easy way to try out your amazing API. And this changes lives. My work at the FinTech is to manage a team of testers. These are developers and these are individuals that they click around the website, and that's easy enough to do. Right? I teach you any website, I tell you how to do it, you know what to expect, that's it. But once I tell you, perfect, now we need for you to test the API, then you could set up Postman and run on it. I don't want to turn it on because there's a bunch of things on my company there. You could do that. Or you could simply, if I could tell you, listen, there's a Postman page on it, you'll be like, wow. The Postman tells me what to come in there. I can just fill in forms. I can just come in here. That's the call. Oh, cool. Imagine if you had this for your final project for your API. If you had, and also imagine if you had just created the API, added one line, and boom, you've gotten all the documentation. You could gotten all the way to test them, all the way to see what's going on in there. Well, you know what? Let's execute it. Let's try it. Oh my God, I see what's going on in there. This is not supposed to be ID, it's supposed to be underscore ID. Now I know what the problem is. You could save yourself so much time. No need to set up Postman, no need to try it out, no need to try to debug what's going on in your page, see what's going on from the back end to the front end and things like that. There's no need to do any of those things. You just have magic. That's it, folks. This is the magic time. This is when I think I lost you guys. You guys still there?
Yep, still
Yes,
there.
we are. Yes, we are. Okay. So I don't know where the link went to, but I know you guys are still part of the conversation, and I love it. There you are. And that's everything. C# is something you can do. C# is something that you can get. That's one more additional star in your multiple book full of stars that you can get. It is not a requirement. C# jobs pay well, but you can find a job like Sebastian's that does JavaScript, does CSS, does amazing things, and pays much better than all the next C# programmers. But if there is an opportunity, if there is interest, if you like it, it is true. A lot of the financial jobs tend to like JavaScript. I'm sorry, C# is what I'm trying to say. And so it is something that's loved by the a lot of companies. It is something that's going to be very successful, and it is something that you're going to have a great time using and learning. So